Thank you, everyone, so much for joining us today. We're here with QuickTag, and we're here for a webinar on how to raise your invoice process IQ with AP automation. LBMC Technology Solutions has been partnering with QuickTag for several years now. They've got stellar customer service, and we have a lot of clients that have had great success with their solution. So I know you'll really look forward to this today, and I'd love to pass it over to Michael Sortino here, and he'll get us started.
Super. Thanks, Sarah. And thanks everyone for joining as well. I'm going to run through who we are, and then we'll dive into the presentation. We have a lot of great things to show you and to discuss, and hopefully it'll get the wheels turning as far as how this will apply to your situation and make life better all around. So who I am, I'm a partner manager here at nChoice, and I'm joined by our Director of Marketing and Channel, Mary Miller. Hey, Mary, how are you today?
Doing well. Thanks, Michael, and thanks, Sarah, for having us. Welcome, everyone.
Yeah, and then we have a dedicated account manager, Matt O'Neill. So he's here with us, and he will be here with you for further questions after the webinar as well. Hey, Matt,
hello, everyone. It's going great. Hello, everyone, and thanks for your interest. If you ever have additional questions or want to connect afterwards, you can reach out to your LBMC rep or call us directly, email me directly, whatever, and we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, and speaking of questions, there is an ability to type in questions along the way. So we will keep an eye on that. Someone had asked earlier, will this be recorded for access later? And the answer is yes. Hopefully you saw that answer. But as we go, we'll keep an eye, but we do have time at the end to address any questions. So take a look, make sure you know where that box is, and feel free to type away. As far as what we'll be covering today, we're going to go through, Mary's going to talk us through the major changes in AP. Obviously, the landscape has changed dramatically in the work environment as well. So, and you'll see how QuickTag can address that. We have a couple great real world scenarios to share with you, one at the beginning and then one closer to the end. So we'll do one there, talk about how we were able to help one of our favorite customers. And then Mary's going to walk you through a demo of QwikPayables for GP. This is our AP automation solution that helps address the need for invoice processing. Then we'll go through some of the benefits, another use case, and have, like I said, that time for questions at the end. So Mary, talk to us about the major changes in AP that we're seeing.
Yeah, what we're seeing in the market, what's really important to understand here is that even before the pandemic, a lot of organizations were really struggling with beginning to see decentralized accounting. What does that mean? Well, for different organizations, it might mean different things. But what we saw most often was that we went from the majority of organizations having a standard, central building. As you may have noticed, Matt and I are actually in our home office today, a rarity, friends. It hasn't happened in more than 2 years now. But for the most part, we all used to come to the office every day and do our jobs. And even before the pandemic, we started to see a lot of more decentralized invoice processing, by which if you were at a different location, or maybe you had gone to an offsite area, or if you were on a project site or something like that, a lot of invoices were still being managed by people who needed to get them from these remote locations into their AP team that might be in an office building, much like we are today. And so what happens is that then there's a lack of visibility in that process, because you're spending time shipping and scanning and trying to make sure that accounting has everything that they need you to pay the bills, just like we would if we were all in the same office. So as that transition moved us into the entirely or nearly entirely remote workforce that we see today, we now have the issue of the one group, the one team that's coming into the office most often was accounting. And we can speak to that here even in our own company, when a few of us would come into the office. The people that we would see would be the AP team.
Yep.
Somebody still, what's that?
I was saying, yeah, that's right. That's exactly who we would see.
That's exactly right. And so somebody had to still come in and open the envelope and scan the invoices, or, receive the emails and forward them to somebody or whatever. And so it just created another level of lack of visibility, lack of control, and people had to very, very quickly adapt their practices so that they could live in this digital environment now with everybody being remote. And in many cases, that led to the next couple of factors that you see here on the slide. The next one being subscription purchasing. Now, I don't know if you're like me, where if I find a great tool or solution or service or whatever that I think is going to be great for our team, I go, yep, I've got my corporate credit card and I sign us up and away we go. Well, that's as awesome if, in fact, I'm getting the best deal. But if I have perhaps not, if I don't have visibility into what else is going on in the company, maybe another department saw a very similar tool and said, hey, I'm going to start buying this for my team, and I'm going to use my corporate credit card, and we're just going to start buying the things that we need. Again, compounded by the fact that many of us are remote. We might not talk about this as much down the hall, in the kitchen, at the water cooler, or whatever. So we think we're getting these great deals and we can provide these services and they're reasonable and we can put them on our corporate card. That's awesome, except for the fact that, again, we might not be getting the purchasing power if maybe we put our heads together, or our teams together, our subscriptions together in this case, and be able to control that from a company standpoint. Say, hey, if we could consolidate and get one vendor that does the same thing, then we're going to get a better price. You're all going to be on the same system, et cetera, et cetera. So it's very convenient. It can be very good for the company, but in a disconnected environment, it's really important that you have that conversation so that you know you're getting the best deal and that you have visibility and control over what those systems and tools might be. And of course, all of this leads to the cloud adoption. Now, again, I don't know about you, but when COVID first happened and everybody went home, we had a ton of calls around, how can I get my system to the cloud? I need to get my team to have access. Not everybody's even, able to log in, but if I can get them into QuickTag, I know they can see their invoices. I know they can process them. We can prove them. I know we can still pay the bills. So that's just one example, but many systems and many organizations have moved to the cloud, not only for the convenience, but also the cost savings and the reliability and the decreased need to put their own IT team into more of a maintenance environment. So there's no longer the need for them to manage servers and make sure that the licenses are upgraded and on the current versions and all of that of their server software and infrastructure. So cloud adoption is certainly a driver. So AP has been following this path just like many other departments in your organizations, and many of these challenges and changes have led organizations to say, we've got to streamline, especially AP, we have to automate this process. So that's what we saw in the example of this next customer scenario that Michael has up on the screen. So we have a customer that came to us actually right at the beginning of the pandemic, ironically enough, and they said, we've had this as a priority for a while, this AP automation thing, this project, right? And we talked to a lot of companies that can relate and are in a similar situation. So if you're one of them, good news, you're not alone. Better news, we can help you and we can share the success and stories of other customers that have been in this situation. So this customer came to us at the beginning of March and they said, we've been putting off this project for a while, but now we simply can't, for a lot of those reasons we just talked about, right? Everybody all of a sudden had to go home. And this was a software company. This was a technology company. They knew the value of the technology and being digital and automating, but for whatever reason, this project hadn't made it to the top of the list until the pandemic hit. So when that happened, the CEO said, okay, we're not going to have any more printers. We're not going to have any more paper. And right before the pandemic, they were actually moving to a new floor in the building where it was going to be all newly designed and high tech, and there weren't even going to be any printers on the floor. And so that was a natural driver. But then when the pandemic hit, they said, okay, this is absolutely critical. It's now even more important than it was before. So that was the scenario that they were faced with. Now let's talk about their goals. As they began this project, and again, as soon as the pandemic hit, it kicked this into high gear, and they said, all right, we need invoice approval and payment approval because now we have everybody in these remote environments. And I don't know about your organization, but with us, even when we were here, it was sometimes tough to, walk down the hall and say, hey, is this invoice approved? Did it get coded correctly, who's next in the approval line. You know, maybe you've got 1 or 2 or 3 levels of approval based on thresholds or your control processes, whatever that might be. They had now no visibility into that. And it was tough even when they were in the office. So they knew that was a goal that they needed to achieve. They needed to have visibility and control over their invoice and their payment approval process. To the right, you see increase accuracy of GL coding. Now, we're all human, right? Anybody can fat finger and miskey something, that happens. But in this particular organization, they had a challenge to control the GL codes that were even being available for their AP staff to enter. So if you're in a situation perhaps that has GL codes associated with a different company or a different department or codes that are no longer active, it was really tough for them to control somebody to prevent them from using codes that were no longer valid or inactive. So they needed a process to enable only active GL codes to be available for their team to code so that there couldn't be any miscoding. That led to a lot of, journal entries at the end of the month and tracking people down to see if it was really coded properly, and just wasted a ton of time, as you can probably imagine. So of course, a result of that was they wanted to accelerate their month-end close process so that they could get through audits faster and easier, whether that was an internal or an external audit. And so they implemented AP automation with us. We call it KwikPayables Accelerate. You're going to see a demo of that in a little while. And they instantly were able to regain credibility for the efficiency and the accuracy of how their invoices were being processed. And they addressed all these goals and now are able to get through the month-end close process. They actually the AP team is now the hero in the organization, which is really cool. They send us pictures, they're like, we're getting awards now. And that just, that's the kind of life-changing experience that Michael was alluding to before. It's yes, it's about the process. Yes, it's about going digital. Yes, it's about automating, but it's also about making the team that has to deal with this process in a very manual environment really regaining their level of credibility and expertise as finance experts, and bring that to the light of the organization so that they can see the benefit that that's bringing to everybody, including the work-life balance and stress-free environment that they now experience in the AP team. So Michael, that's just one example that I wanted to share with the group.
Thanks, Mary. It's perfect. And we were just chatting beforehand, right, about some of the common challenges companies are facing, and one of them is hiring and retention. And you just spoke to it perfectly, because when people come to an organization, they want to see that, especially newer generations, want to see this level of automation already in place, or that there is a path to get there. Yeah, so let's pause for a moment and ask a question of our attendees. This is something we like to do when we're doing these presentations to get you involved, and so that we can learn a little bit more about you as well. So our first polling question is, what are your greatest AP or invoice process challenges? And we're not going to just limit this to one, because we know there's a lot of different challenges. So go ahead and choose all that apply. The poll should be coming up here in a moment here. Haley, if you're able to activate that.
Yep, it's visible.
All right, there it is. And
yeah, we see a lot of these as challenges, certainly data entry errors. In fact, that's the #1 issue for 74% of AP professionals worldwide. So I hope that wasn't a spoiler alert, but if you can relate to that, definitely check the box. But a lot of these issues really come into play. So just, share with us. This is our way of keeping it interactive. Share with us the challenges that you face on a daily basis with your team and your AP and invoice process today. We appreciate your participation.
Yep, definitely. All right. Looks good. Thanks so much, everybody, for doing that. We'll have a couple more, and I appreciate your responses. As we move on here, before we dive into the demo that Mary's going to walk you through the solution that we offer, Matt, why don't you tell us about what you've been helping customers put in place, which is basically the process here that we see in front of us, and how our solution changes lives.
Sure. Thank you, Michael. Yeah, so what Mary's going to show you is this flow, this demo flow, and it's really how the majority of QuickTag customers benefit and use the system. She's going to walk through this, and I'll explain kind of the path here. But if you ever want to have an individual demo where we talk to you about your business and kind of show you what's possible and different things, different workflows that our customers have used and benefited from, we can certainly do that. So anytime you want to get together for an individual demo, we'll certainly do that. Today's path is going to follow this flow. You'll see here on the left, invoices captured. We have a strong document management heritage. So documents can come into the system a lot of different ways. You can scan them in, you can bulk scan them in, you can have everything redirected from your AP inbox over to QuickTag. You can just have your team email them in, a lot of different ways to get them in. Once they come into the system, they go through an initial OCR scan, and that is for content search. So basically, every document that comes into the system understands every word, term, string of characters, document number, or keyword on every document that comes in, which is where the search comes from. You can just type in your search on the search bar, and any document that meets that criteria will be pulled up. Really strong, powerful document management functionality there. Once the document's in the system, it goes through that initial scan, and then it goes through the next block here in the flow, KTIQ, which is the Intelligent Invoice Data Extraction. And this is a huge benefit for companies that struggle with a number of invoices, a high volume of invoices, and a lot of manual entry. What this does is it looks at the invoice like a person would and says, hey, I understand what this is. I recognize that vendor. I recognize the vendor's phone number. It will communicate with GP to get some information so that when the AP person first opens up the invoice to look at it, all of that stuff is already populated, including things that aren't on the invoice. GP will kick over the vendor ID, for example, and also some GL coding if it exists in the vendor card. So really powerful stuff that will help you obviate a lot of that manual data entry. From there, it goes to the approval process, and that's one part. If we do a demo for you, we'll tell you all the different possibilities, and we'll find out how you guys currently do your your approvals, and show you that workflow and everything. And Mary will show this in the demo, the whole workflow process for approvals. The approvers have two different user experiences. They can receive an email with all of the information, including an image of the invoice and two buttons that say approve or reject. But they can also go in the system, KTX, which is our web client, and they can handle the approvals there, whatever user experience they prefer. From there, everything, once it goes through the approval process, ends up in what's called the work queue. And Mary will show this. This is where you just select the invoices you want to put into GP and drop them in a batch, and they continue into GP. We also can take it a step further. We have a partner called CSI where they can set it up to understand your relationship with your vendors, how your vendors like to get paid, and they will actually make the payments for you, whether it's a check or ACH or a digital payment, and then update QuickTag and GP with the method of payment, the date, the amount, all of that information. So you no longer have to do your check runs and things like that. You still can, but you can have the system handle that payment for you. So that's kind of the high level flow of the demo today. And again, if you want to see a demo more specific to your business and your processes and requirements, just let us know and we can always set that up.
Super, thanks, Matt. And Mary, we'll pass it over to you to log into the system and walk us through. And as I mentioned before, any questions that come up from our attendees, feel free to type them in the chat and we'll keep an eye on those.
Excellent. Thank you, Matt, for the process overview, and Michael for the background on what we're going to see here. So everybody, you just saw the slide that Michael had with the login screen. Guys, now you should see KTX. Is that correct? See my screen?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I've spared you the step of logging in, but you saw the screen. I've already done that, and this is what I'm presented with. Now, what we're going to walk through is, as Matt just described, invoices have been sent in to KwikPayables, and then we as the AP, we're going to first put our AP manager hat on, and then we're going to submit an invoice for review and approval by said approver. Now we're going to have a little bit of, compliance, non-normal experience here because I'm going to approve my own invoices. Obviously, that's not what your team is going to do, but we'll play along for demo purposes. And then once that invoice is approved, we'll see the transaction be created directly into GP as Matt described in that process flow. But what we hear from customers, even the step of receiving these invoices, you see this grid. I've got a list of payables invoices here to index. You can see over here on the left, I've got several other what we call work queues or task queues, invoice queues, if you will, that are also available. Let me talk for a second about why this is important. When KTIQ receives an invoice, it does more than just extract the data. It does more than reach into GP to populate that data. It combines those in pieces of information to intelligently decide, is this a payables invoice? Is this a purchase order related invoice that's a shipment invoice? Is it a purchase order related invoice that's an enter match? It's doing a lot of that thinking for you. It's doing the lookup into GP to see if there's a receiving transaction. So that's how KwikPayables knows which queue to put the invoices in. Now, we're going to start with a payables invoice, one that's going to end up in our payables transaction entry in GP. But I'm presented with this list of data. And you can see here, a lot of this information is already filled in. I'm just going to filter to an invoice that I know I need to work, put in my initials, and there we go. So we're presented with an invoice from Interiors, Inc. You can see the row of data here that it's an invoice. It's got the document date, the document number, the purchases amount. So I have some idea about this invoice before I even, go to work as an AP manager to make sure that it gets coded correctly and routed correctly and all of that. You may have noticed as soon as I clicked on that row, the document then displays on the right-hand side. So I can see, yes, in fact, this is the invoice from Interiors for $492.80. Fantastic. That's the one we're going to process. I simply click on my little edit icon here, and now I've got my AP manager hat on. And I can tell you, I used to be an AP manager for GP. I know exactly what this is like when you do it the long way, when you receive the invoices in the mail and open them up and type it all in. Like I've been there, I've lived that life. And this takes all of the manual steps away from that. Now, you'll notice here, the first thing I get is a duplicate document number warning message. So we're looking here to see if this invoice number, of course, we don't want to pay our bills twice, right? We want to see if it's in GP, which in this case it is. We're going to say, okay, we're going to make it a unique number. But we also check in the KwikPayables duplicate detection to see if this invoice is in KwikPayables. That matters because what if I've already sent this invoice to Matt for approval and it's sitting in his queue? And so now it's just waiting for him to approve and send to the next step in the process. So we don't want to start the process again for an invoice, whether it's already in the KwikPayables process or if it's in GP. I'm going to make this number unique so that we can continue on our AP process to submit this invoice. But in most cases, you're going to make that business decision based on whether you're wanting to pay a duplicate invoice or if you need to make it something unique, if it's a monthly code or whatever. The next thing is you can see all of this header information already populated. Again, some of it has come off the invoice, like the name Interiors, we looked that up, and then we looked up the address and the phone number and other information in GP as Matt described. And so you can see here the vendor ID is populated for me. So all of the data on the left-hand side, the header data, if you will, has been populated based on a combination of what we read and what we validated in GP because we have a real-time connection to GP to pull in this information. The next field that really comes to life in is the GL distributions. So as soon as I click on GL distributions, you'll see this grid pop down below that you may have surmised based on what we've described came straight through from the vendor card. So if you're using vendor defaults for your GL codes in GP, we're going to show those to you here. So again, with my AP manager hat on, I have not done one bit of data entry other than to make the invoice number unique so that I don't get a duplicate warning error message or warning message throughout this process. I validate my GL codes. Of course, I could add or remove or adjust any of those. I can use distribution reference. I can put something in the description, all of those fields just like you would be able to do in GP. But essentially, I'm done. The invoice looks good. The amount is correct. The GL codes are accurate. It pulled in the proper date, invoice, number, vendor, etc. All I have to do is look at this invoice and say, who do I need to send it to? Again, I'm going to break protocol controls here from a compliance standpoint. I'm going to send it to myself for demo purposes. You're going to, in most cases, pick an approver based on your business workflow and the process and controls that you have in place. We'll work with you to configure all of that. You don't need to worry about it. Okay, so when we pick that name, we've now sent that invoice off for review and approval. On my left-hand side, you see that I also have a payables invoice review queue because I play multiple roles in this workflow scenario, in this demo experience. If I was only an approver, so in your case, as a user of KwikPayables, your AP staff is going to most likely have, the index and the final review step. We'll get to that in a second. Your approvers are most likely only going to have a review step, so they won't have as many queues to sort through. The process will determine what's visible for each person in that, what their roles are in the process. Okay. So here's the invoice that we just submitted. It's in our payables invoice review. There's an email notification. We'll come back to that in a second. Remember, Matt said there's 2 ways for an approver to review and approve an invoice. That's one of them. I'm going to show you here in the online experience first, where we click on the row, we see the data on the right, and I have a couple more things I can do here. I can see the GL codes. I can see the workflow history. Those are both also going to be visible for me in the email, which we'll take a look at now. But then there's one other thing that I can do in the online environment in KTX that I can't do in email. But this email approval is great. Let me tell you, I approve emails as well for our budgeting and within my division of the company. And if I'm traveling, or even if I'm at home having coffee or whatever, I get an email on my phone, as most of us do. We carry our phones everywhere. As many of us have work email access on our phone. I get the email. As you can see here, the document is attached, the invoice is attached, and all of the same data that we just looked at together in KwikPayables is visible for me in this email. The GL codes, the workflow history, what happens next. I click approve or reject, and away it goes to the next step. Now, if I reject, I have to put in some comments. Approve does not require comments, but either way, it's a very simple tap, tap, send, and I'm done. I'm going to show you one more thing that you can do here in the online environment that is not an option in the mobile client, in the email client rather, and that is I could delegate. Now this comes into play mostly when it's an exception. Let's say most of the time I process interiors invoices and I'm the one that's supposed to approve them, but in this case it's Matt's turn. This is for a special project that he's doing, so I need to delegate this to him. So I'm going to pick somebody to delegate to. I'm going to put in some comments and say, hey Matt, this is that special project you're working on, and send it to him with some comments about why I'm doing that. So that's an additional option you have. Now we also have a global delegate. Let's say I'm going on vacation and I need to assign all my tasks to Michael while I'm away. You can do that as well. So those options exist here too. In this case, we're going to go ahead and approve this invoice, and we're going to say Matt says, please rush. Comments are optional, but again, for demo purposes and to follow along, we'll have a little fun with it. We'll put in some comments. So the process there is done. Now that took probably 10 times longer because we were walking through each step and describing it together than it would if you were the AP person looking through these invoices and processing them on a daily basis. Okay, so they come into your queue, you validate the coding, you pick the approver, hit send, you're on to the next one. The next step in the process for the approver, they see which ones they need to approve, they approve, and then they move on. Now, we also have in our demo environment, and because most customers ask for this, we have a step called Payables Invoice Final. Now, what that means is if you have given your approvers the ability to code, let's just say, or if they have, it's very common for them to put comments in that step of the review process, and they need to send that back to AP. This gives AP one final chance to validate or update any invoice data. So again, we're presented with the edit experience, although this time it's now completed. Had we put any comments here, those would be visible for us. Of course, we can still see the workflow history. There's our Matt says, please rush. So as the AP person, I have this access to say, oh gosh, that was the wrong date, or I needed to update the code, or maybe in the reviewer process, somebody said, please update the code because this needs to go to Matt's project instead. Okay, all of those sorts of things. Our customers tell us AP wants a final look because this is your audit trail. This is what's going to help make your audits next quarter, next year, whatever, super easy. You look up this invoice number, you look up all interiors invoices, you look up any invoice over, $400, $10,000, whatever, and here at your fingertips is that workflow history. So that's all going to be captured and maintained as part of this record in KwikPayables. Now, because we don't need to change anything, we're going to go ahead and submit this invoice. If you recall, the process flow that Matt walked us through right before we started the demo is that now this invoice is going to come into GP. So we do a create through what's called the additional menu. If you use other ISVs that connect to the additional menu, you may be familiar with this. If you don't, this will be a new option that will appear in your ribbon on your payables transaction entry and about 79 other screens in GP from QuickTag that we connect to for document management purposes. Story for another day. Let's finish the AP process here. All of the functions starting with tag documents down are QuickTag functionality. Tag is where we would, that's nomenclature for attach, if you want to attach a new document using QuickTag. View, we'll see in just a second once we create this transaction. Search, we have a very powerful search, whether it's within GP or within QuickTag, it's still leveraging the QuickTag data and documents. But when the workflow completes for an invoice process, we send it to this work queue inside of GP, but powered by QuickTag. So this is the final step in the KwikPayables workflow as it's facilitated by the invoice process that we just went through. So here's our invoice. You can see my comment there. Matt says, please rush. This is the one, interiors for $492.80. And my options here, you see I've got a list. My options here are to send just the one invoice that we just created together and process together into a batch, which is what we're going to do. But in a normal real world scenario, you're probably going to grab all of these, right? You're going to go, this is this week's batch, put them into today's date and whatever AP nomenclature you use to name your batches, and away they go. So then they'll all be created as individual payables transaction entries inside of GP. I'm just going to grab the one. We share this demo environment. I don't want to, mess up somebody else's process. So I'll put the invoice that we just worked through into my 2022 M&M batch. It will disappear out of this queue and then be created automatically for us as a payable transaction entry inside of GP. So I select that. You can see all of the data. You can see the GL distributions carry through. Now I'm going to pause here for a second. Back to that story that I shared with you with the company that had the challenge of, accurate coding and invoice approval visibility and accelerating month-end close. That company has about more than 1,000 invoices a month, and they also use binary stream mem. Our system supports that. So if you were using binary stream mem or native GP intercompany, those descriptions and company IDs would carry through to your GLs and would be visible here. If you're using binary stream mem, we create the due to, due from transaction for you here as well. So if your organization has those requirements, just know that much like that scenario I shared with you before, we support that technology integration with binary stream mem for GP as well. So again, our transactions created, we have not done any data entry in GP, nor will we, because we don't want to degrade our audit trail. Now we know who touched what, when, where, and now this transaction is created in the ERP. We come to the View Documents button, and because this invoice went through the process of KwikPayables and had us create that payables transaction entry, we also associate the document to the transaction. So that's the payables invoice workflow. It looks like it's visible and lives inside a GP, but that document actually lives in QuickTag because it's living in a payables entry drawer, payables transaction entry drawer inside of QuickTag, so that you don't have to worry about saving all of those documents and data or anything like that in your GP database. We're going to take care of all of that for you on the QuickTag side. Now, we also want to take a quick look at a purchase order related invoice. This is, if we were having open discussion, I would pause at this point and ask if there's any questions. So before we jump into PO, Michael or Matt, anything to jump in and add before we take a look at this process flow?
Looks
All
good,
good
Mary.
here. Yeah, good job.
Yeah. I just
Cool.
love how seamless it is, because a lot of, there's no downloading of info, no,
Right.
the
No import,
systems
export.
yeah, exactly. No import, export. And there it is, right there in GP.
There it
Love
is.
it.
Yep, exactly. So from a purchase order standpoint, again, you may recall we talked about this a little bit earlier. KTIQ will do its best to identify the type of invoice that it's receiving based on not only what it extracts off the invoice, but also what it finds in GP. By way of example, if it's a purchase shipment invoice, as you might expect, it would look into GP to say, is there a receiving transaction against this? And if the answer is no, it's going to assume that it's a shipment invoice. Now, can it occasionally get, can the time get ahead of the process? Yes. So if, let's say the receiving transaction hasn't been posted yet, we haven't received the goods yet, and KwikPayables and the invoice beat the process to the punch. KwikPayables, you can easily change the workflow. KwikPayables says, oh, I think this is a shipment invoice because I didn't find a receiving transaction, and in fact, next day or whatever, we do get the goods in and we decide it needs to go into an enter match state. It is a three-way match. You can quickly and easily change that flow here as well. But the system will, again, read the information off the invoice and validate it with GP. So we're going to take a look at an enter match invoice. So let me just pick one of Matt's here. We'll pick on Matt's invoices here today. Again, you can see that in this row of data, KwikPayables has looked into GP. It's found this purchase order number, MO2139. And the invoice amount is $166.57. And you can see in this row data that it's gathered the vendor document number, the date, and the vendor and all of that. So now when we come into our edit experience, as again, we've got our AP manager hat on here, we're going to get that same duplicate detection because it doesn't want us to pay our bills twice, as is a good practice. We don't want to do that. I'm going to go ahead and put today's date there and give it a B on the end there. But you'll notice the rest of this information, again, is populated for us. The vendor ID, we pulled back from GP, the invoice date, the invoice total, the freight amount that you can see over here was extracted and populated into the freight field. And down at the line item level, you can see that, yes, this PO is MO2139, just as it is on the invoice. And on the invoice, you see we ordered 200 of these boxes at 47 cents each for a total of $94. We come down to this purchase order line and we see, in fact, we have received $200 boxes rather to the tune of 47 cents each for a total of $94. We also see the matching receipt number. So again, KwikPayables has done the job for us. We don't need to do any data entry. We don't need to think about it. This is essentially a validation step. So with our AP manager hat on, we can say, well, this is a match, and so I don't need to send it for approval. So if I did need to send it for approval, of course, I would have that option to do so. But I'm also presented even here with the tax breakdown. I see the tax schedule ID and the details here down at the bottom. My invoice total is $166.57, just as it is here. So all of the information that I need to process this invoice is available at my fingertips. It all looks good. I don't need to enter anything. I don't need to route it for approval. I just need to submit it. So in the payables transaction flow, we had a lot of different controls, right? We needed to send it to Mary for review and approval. Maybe if it was over $5,000, we need to send it to the CFO for approval. Those sorts of things can be built into the workflow. In a situation where you're dealing with purchase orders and the potential that they match essentially out of the gate, we will automatically create those transactions for you as a purchasing invoice entry or a shipment invoice transaction if you're doing two-way in GP if you don't need approval. You can still go through the approval routing again if that's what your process requires, but it's not necessary. If your controls say if it matches, create the transaction, we're good to go, then it will be here for us inside of GP. So here's the one that we were just working with. It's our Uline invoice, and we'll create it into a batch here. Inside of GP, we'll pick one. There's, again, my 2022 M&M batch. And this invoice will disappear out of our work queue and populate as a transaction inside of GP. Now, there's some other creative things that you can do with the documents for that too. If, for example, it's really important that you have the purchase order document or some sort of approved purchase email, slip, form, whatever, associated at the purchase order, you can attach that using QuickTag at the purchase order transaction. If you have the packing slip or bill of lading or whatever it is, scan it in, upload it to the receiving transaction. And then when you get to the additional view documents, if those have been associated with this purchase order, you will see all of them here when you click view documents. So we received a quote, we have the packing slip, and then of course the invoice that we just created together as part of our workflow process. So that's how it works for purchase order related invoices. I saved that for the end because if you blinked, you missed it. It was a pretty quick process. We validated the information, everything matched. We click submit, it's here in GP. Same thing works for the shipment invoice process, and we'd create the receiving transaction entry for you in that step as well. So Michael, that pretty much concludes the demonstration of both a payables transaction entry and a purchase order related invoice. If you want to take it from there, that would be great.
Yeah,
I
that's
see
great.
you got the screen. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. And maybe you or Matt can speak to the last part of the process. We'd love to go into much greater detail about payment automation, but the fact that you were able to digitize your documents, manage the whole process now electronically and automatically, as Mary demonstrated, we don't want that to fall off when it comes to the payment side. So if either of you want to go through this, Mary, maybe since you're on, you can talk to this last part and how we help in this situation.
Yeah, it's a great point, Michael. You know, the reason that we actually introduced this functionality into KwikPayables was actually several years ago, where our customers were telling us, and again, maybe you can relate to the scenario, they had the entire invoice process digitized and automated like we just walked through together. And then when it came time to print the checks, issue the payments through whatever mechanism the customer was using, they would then print out those invoices and any supporting documentation and the check remit slip, and they would take a stack of paper to their CFO or controller or whoever the signer was and go, okay, here you go, review all of this and then sign it. And they said, wait, you know, it just seems backwards that we're automating this whole process and then we're printing at the end. So we said, you know, hey, we can solve that problem. And so we introduced an element. Again, we've had this in the product for several years. We've recently enhanced it to the extent that when payment batches in GP are posted and ready for review, you can easily pull those in. Again, we don't have time for all of this in demo process, but just follow along with me, if you will, on the slide. You can pull the entire batch in. So the row that's highlighted, say Uptown Trust for, you know, batch ID DCCHK right there, 637. Yeah, when I click into that, I see, oh, there's a check for $634.70. And then at the next level down, I see these are the two payable transaction entries. These are the two invoices that check or payment is actually covering. I can review that. I can click a button to pull in any unposted batches to create this view for whoever my reviewer and signer is, and I don't have to print a thing. And then the extended beauty of that to close the loop, and again, this is based on customer requests and market feedback, was after the payment is issued, even if you don't use our payment service, if you go to the next slide, please, Michael. Even if you don't use our payment service that Matt described as an optional service that we can provide through our partner, we will provide this data back into KwikPayables for you. So whether you cut the checks, whether you issue ACHs or payments or do it through your bank or whatever, we will provide this detail back into KwikPayables. So we save the time and energy and paper on the front end of the review process for whoever the check approver or payment approver is by giving you that batch view and all the drill down. And then after the payments are made, we give you back the payment number, the payment method, and the payment date in KwikPayables. Because a lot of times people were getting that phone call, right? What's the status of this payment? And then they would have to look in GP. Well, what if that person wasn't a GP user? They can just come into KwikPayables and access that information at their fingertips. So we really close the loop with the payment data being visible in KwikPayables, again, whether you use our payment service or not to pay your vendors.
That's great, Mary. And I love how it's all in one place now and
Absolutely.
easy to find. Okay, so thanks everybody. We showed you a lot of good things. Let's gather another, some input from you as well. So if you can share, we'll get another poll question up here. How do you pay your vendors today? And you can choose as many as apply. Checks, ACH, wire, corporate credit card. Those are very popular, and virtual cards are becoming more and more popular, aren't they, Mary?
They are indeed. They are indeed. And, you know, it's interesting. A lot of people are beginning to learn and ask questions about, you know, the difference between the corporate card and the virtual card and what's the advantage over that versus wire and that sort of thing. And we're happy to have that conversation offline, but just as you're thinking about how your organization pays your bills today, as you check these boxes, be aware that, as I'm sure you know, there's cost associated with checks and ACH and wires and even, you know, corporate cards as transaction fees and sometimes can apply. with virtual cards, it takes a lot of that data entry and cost and time out of the equation and adds an element of security. So if you're just getting started thinking about these types of payments, or maybe you think, hey, I'm working with my bank and they've got a pretty good thing, that's great. You can still use your own bank and still maybe find a more efficient way and maybe a less costly way to process your payments. I'll just kind of plant that as a seed in the back of your mind, and we can revisit that if you have questions about it later. But thanks for participating.
Yeah, thanks everybody. And so just a quick review on the benefits that were hopefully obvious to you as we were moving along and showing everything. But Mary, maybe you could summarize
Yeah,
what
absolutely.
QuickTag offers.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. We hear these from a lot of customers, and if I had a little icon there or box for everything that we heard, we'd need 3 or 4 slides just to tell the story, which is great, because our customers tell us that it reduces the data entry when they automate their AP. It reduces their overall cost. We had one customer call us, I think, Michael, you're going to talk about it here in a second, that called us the same day to share their benefits. And I don't want to steal your thunder, because I can't wait for you to share the story. But it reduces their costs. It reduces their fraud risk. Think about when you come in for, when your auditors come in now and you have to go, find documents that might be living in an offsite storage, or, in the middle of a grain silo in North Dakota. Real story, story for another day. But we have customers who have had to store documents, very sensitive documents, in very insecure environments, and now we have the option not only to digitize those documents, but also help them with the payment data to give it really a secure environment where they have access. It really gives them control over their organizational spend. Think about how much visibility you would have if you knew everything that was in your AP process at a glance, instead of having to check people's emails or track it on a spreadsheet or send things from one office to the other via FedEx or courier or whatever. True stories. We still hear this stuff all the time. We have a seamless integration with the AP and payment automation all-in-one system, as you saw here in the demonstration. And it really, this is the number 2 benefit, if you will, the reduced data entry being the number 1 benefit. The number 2 benefit is that visibility. And of course, all of that is supported by the cost savings and efficiencies that the AP team, as well as the whole organization, gains by having their AP process automated and digital.
Yeah, that's great. And we did have a quick question about whether CSI, our payment provider, utilizes virtual cards, and the answer is yes on that.
Mm-hmm.
We will get to these other questions at the end, but just wanted to drop that in real quick here. And Mary, do you want to kick off this next use case scenario?
Sure. So in this customer situation, this is the one I was alluding to a moment ago, where they called us the first day they went live with this solution. And friends, for context, before they started using QuikPayables, they were doing everything in 100% paper. And as you can see, they had 10 to 12,000 invoices per month. They had 117 different entities with invoices and payments that were being processed out of all of them. They had more than 14,000 active vendors, and everything was manual. So clearly a situation where they needed automation and digital process. Now, if you recall, the company we talked about earlier, they had about 1,000 invoices a month. I say that by way of comparison, so that you don't think, oh my gosh, if I don't have 1,000 or 10,000 invoices a month, then this isn't good. I don't qualify. This isn't going to help me. Well, not true, because what's happened in the course of AP automation moving to the cloud and becoming more of a complete solution like this, it is much easier to deploy. It is much more affordable. Matt can talk about, how we price to make it, basically scalable to any size of organization. So that organization had 1,000 invoices. This organization has 10 to 12,000 invoices per month. The product scales so that it's not going to break the bank, but it's going to give you significant efficiencies literally from day one. So Michael, if you go to the next slide, we will talk about, what they said. It was crazy. They called and they said a process that used to take 2.5 weeks, we can now do in less than 2 hours. And if I showed you, all of the rest of the things in the demo that the product is capable of, you would see exactly how that happened for them. But suffice to say that once they implemented the automation step, it saved all of the human intervention time of running around. It took away the data entry. The visibility gave them access, so they knew who was going to approve an invoice at the click of a button, and they were able to just significantly accelerate that process. They used to have 9 steps in their process. They went down to 4. And as a result of that, by the end of the first year, which wasn't even a complete year that they had KwikPayables in place, they reduced their paper utilization down to less than 12%. Now they're at nearly 0. And they tracked their team productivity. How many invoices did each person on my team process per day? They increased their productivity by 52%, and they measured these things over the course of the first week, the first month, and then by the end of the year. So they were able to see very measurable benefits. And like I said, they were so excited. They called us the first day. They're like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe this just happened." So it's back to that point of, you want your staff to be happy. You want your staff to be stress-free. You want them to be efficient, and giving them the tools to make their job better and provide such value for the company is just really exciting for us to share. So those are just a couple examples of customer scenarios that we've experienced in working with them.
Yeah, and I love it when she shares the story. Our customer, the AP manager, she does literally. When I saw her, she did a little dance of joy. She was she was so excited. And that point that you said about it was day 1 when they called in. She had expected that it was going to take, maybe like a month for her team to fully start to utilize and see benefits. But it's
Right.
so quick and easy, and we do a great job, our team, of training and recording those trainings and making sure everybody knows how to use the system. That as soon as they flipped that switch, it was an instant transformation there. Of course, everybody's different, but I love that experience that she went through. One more question, and then we'll get to your questions here at the end. So how many invoices does your company process monthly on average? We've got you just choose one of these ranges, and as Mary mentioned, there's no wrong answer. We can help at any level that you're at.
Yeah. And one thing I'll add to that, Michael, in terms of the scalability, and I'm sure Matt can speak to this more if you've got specific questions, folks that are joining us here. The one of the prohibiting factors used to be what people considered to be sort of old school OCR, and the expense and the time and the potential rework of setting up a system like that. Often there was a separate interface and a separate structure that needed to be created, templates, if you will, that needed to be created for every vendor, and it can be very time consuming, which drove up the cost. As what we displayed today, even in our demonstration, as well as the process flow that Matt walked through, with KTIQ, there is none of that. It's based on artificial intelligence and machine learning. And so it just learns as it goes, and again, validates your data with GP. So as a result of that, it's built into the product and therefore streamlines the process and reduces the cost to make it much more affordable and attainable for companies really at any size. Michael, we're seeing, companies even that processed 100 or 200 invoices a month and still being able to meet their budget. So that used to be sort of a holdup for people, and that's just no longer a factor.
Yeah, I love it. It's totally great. Quick background on us. If you haven't seen us yet or heard of us before, we are based out of Tempe, Arizona, founded in 1997, started, as you'd heard, in document management, and integrating with Microsoft was and continues to be our main priority. And you can see here how we continue to grow and innovate across the globe, but all of your support is based right here in the US, in Arizona. And you're welcome to join us, maybe not in the summer, since it's already up to the 100 and over 100 degrees down there, but really anytime. Let's get on to some questions, and we're putting Matt's contact here as well, but we're available to help anytime. One of the questions that came through was around multiple companies or multiple entities. So maybe we could, Matt, if you can talk to our integration with Binary Stream and how we support multiple entities, that would be great.
Sure. So many of our customers have multiple entities in their Dynamics instance. Some of them just do manual journal entries. Some of them use native GP intercompany, but some also use Binary Stream's MEM. We support all of that. It's very elegant. We actually have a specific demo that we can do for MEM end users, and we have a video of that. So if you're interested in receiving a little demo video of how that all works, we can get that over to you. Also, we can do a live demo of that for you. So whatever your intercompany needs are, we'd love to talk with you about it and help you out there.
Last question here that we have, and I know we'll need to wrap it up, but talk to us about the rebates that are available if you're using virtual cards through CSI.
Mm-hmm. So I'll take that one. And I think what if you're familiar with the fact that virtual card offers rebates, you're probably ahead of some of the people in the market, because we do talk about that quite a bit. And to many people, if they're new, to many people they are try to figure out, is this a good thing, or is it what does this mean for me? Is there a catch, right? And the reality is that if your company pays vendors that receive or accept virtual cards, you are in many cases going to be eligible for a rebate. So it's based on a percentage of the transaction amount, really. But the key thing is the number and amount of vendors that are able to accept corporate cards or virtual cards. Chances are, if they accept credit cards, chances are they can accept virtual cards as well. Here's the key: that we would do an assessment to see what vendors you pay, what the average of your annual spend is with those vendors that receive virtual cards. A couple things I'll point out that make our integration and our support by CSI unique is that they accept both Visa and MasterCard payments, and not all payment providers and not all credit card payment providers do that. There is no or very little cost to actually set up the application and connect it to KwikPayables. It just sort of becomes an extension, and so it's very much behind the scenes. It would just be integrated as part of your overall KwikPayables process. And then for those virtual cards, for those vendors that are able to accept virtual cards, it's based on the amount that we spend, or the amount that your organization spends with those vendors, and we would work with you to determine what that rebate percentage is. So it's really an assessment and an evaluation of how you're paying bills today and which vendors fit into that bucket of being able to accept them, and then we would work with you to determine what that rebate could be. So it's very sophisticated and yet very easy. In some cases, it actually pays for the majority of the accounts payable costs. So, think about your AP team potentially becoming a revenue center instead of a cost center. Like, it can really help offset the cost of the overall solution, even as you begin with your AP automation system. So win-win on both sides of the conversation, but absolutely happy to have a further conversation with you all about that.
Yeah, I love that when that works out. It's it's a great thing for AP to be able to take advantage of that benefit. All right, and these were amazing questions. Thank you so much for them, and also thanks everyone for joining us. As Matt mentioned, and as you can see here, reach out. We can do one-on-one demos and go through your requirements and your individual questions further in later sessions. And Sarah, thank you so much for having us and helping organize this.
Thank you very much. Have a great day, everyone.